Hello buddies, Murray here and welcome back to my channel Stewart Paintings. As you can see, I'm covered in paint, and today on our acrylic painting tutorial we're going to learn how to paint this hyper-realistic painting of swans in a lake. So in the tutorial I'm hopefully going to teach you how to paint realistic clouds using whites and different shades of blue, how to create sunlight and sunbeams in your sky, how to blend and how to use different types of brushes to paint really realistic water, how to paint reflections really easily and what colours to use, and then lastly how to use highlights and shadows to create realism on your swans. So a lovely easy tutorial that we're going to paint together step by step. So let's get into it. So a nice easy tutorial today. You're going to need the following colours. They're titanium white, cad yellow, cad orange light, chromium oxide green, turquoise, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, iris purple, raw umber and ivory black. Now I've got a burnt sienna stained canvas that I've used chalk and burnt sienna just to create some outlines of a swans. I'm creating sort of a heart shape between the two because Valentine's Day is coming up. And I just want to work on reflections and teach you all reflections today. So we're going to have these gorgeous swans in the middle. We're going to have these lovely reflections, and we're going to have, I've just got chalk and I've created some sunlight coming down on the river, and we're going to have a beautiful sky, and I'm going to teach you all how to paint really realistic clouds today. And then we're going to have some woods in the back, just push back, and we'll bring our swans forward. So just like always, if you want to pause the video and copy down the outline, feel free to do so. We're going to start on the sky like usual and work our way from the back forward. So we're going to paint a nice sky. So we're going to get some cerulean blue, some cobalt blue, more cerulean blue than cobalt blue, and we add just a tiny bit of black to the mix to make it really nice and dark. You only need a little bit of black because black is real colour killer. So just a little bit. So we'll test it at the top of our canvas and just see how dark that is. So that looks good. So lots of cerulean blue, a little bit of cobalt blue just to make it darker, and then just a tad of black. Let's see, that looks quite nice. And what we're trying to do, we're trying to create a very dark top of our painting, to frame it. So I'm going to swap over to a big brush. There we go, let's get plenty of paint. And B, the reason we're going to use a dark blue up at the top of our painting is because we're going to create a lovely light effect. Just here I'm going to have the sun, so I'm just going to leave a little circle where I'm going to have a little bit of sun. I think I've got too much water here, so we'll dry that in a minute and we'll thicken up the paint and go over the top. But what we need is we need a dark sky, so when we have our bright white sun and our sunbeams, I'm going to teach you all later how to paint, it stands out against the dark background. So don't worry about being neat, we just want to block her in. So all I'm doing, I'm just using this really nice dark sort of smoky blue. So as I say, we're going to leave that little gap, and that's going to be our sun. And all we're going to do, we're just going to come down sort of in line on this side. And then as we go towards the bottom of the horizon, we're going to get lighter. So we've got this dark colour here at the top, and then we're going to get lighter as we move down. So all we're going to do, we're going to get some cerulean blue and a little bit of cobalt blue. So again, same mix. We've got lots of cerulean blue and a little bit of cobalt blue. But this time we're just going to add lots and lots of white to the mix. Okay, so cerulean blue, a little bit of cobalt blue and lots of white. So we've got a pastel blue. And we haven't got any black this time in it. So it's nice and pastel. Can you see that? It's very much more pastel. And all we're going to do, we're just going to come down. Don't worry about blending. We're going to have a big jump in colour. We just want to block her in. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to come down to roughly where the tree line is. I'm going to go a little bit lower than the tree line. So look, I'm just smudging it in over that outline. So when I fill in the trees, I haven't got any gaps. I've got everything nice and low. So let's get plenty of paint. So let's just block in this side. Now, everyone asks me why I paint my canvas burnt sienna, especially lots of beginners. The reason I do that, I know this is a bit repetitive and all the people who follow me all the time will know, but the reason I do that is if I have a darker colour in the burnt sienna underneath, where acrylics are water-based, I can see areas where I've missed, and also I can see where they're streaky and I need to thicken up the painting. So this is all dry. I've dried it with a hairdryer, but it looks really, really scruffy, and there's a big jump in colour between the dark blue and the lighter blue. But if you can look at the top, you can see how much there's streaks where my water was too much, and it just looks really, really unprofessional. So all I'm going to do, look, I'm just going to mix the same colour up. So it was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and a dot of black. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to go over the top with the exact same colour, but just with a bit more thicker paint, less water, more paint. And look how much vibrant that is, and less streaky. So when you're painting sometimes on a white canvas and you're using pastel colours such as the light blue beneath it, you don't notice the streaks so much. So the reason I paint my canvas that sort of tea colour, that light sort of brown, is I can see where I need to go over it. I can see where I need to rework areas. So it just helps me. It's just a little trick. You don't have to at home paint your canvas burnt sienna. I've just done it for years. I wouldn't know another way, so to speak. But if you want to paint on a white canvas, help yourself. It's whatever's comfortable for you. But if you find that when you're in the blocking in stage at the very beginning, that your painting looks a bit scruffy and a bit streaky, just take your time and just dry it with a hairdryer, and then just reapply the paint over the top when it's dry, and all those streaks come out. They're all gone. Look how nice that looks now. It looks much more smooth. There's no gaps. There's no bits of canvas shining through. So now we're going to go to the lighter blue. So unfortunately with the acrylics, they do dry very quick. So let's just go around the sun quickly. There we go. They do dry really, really quick, so you have to be quick sometimes. So we're going to mix up some of the lighter shade because mine unfortunately has dried. So it's just cerulean blue, a little bit of cobalt blue, and lots of white. So we've got that pastel blue again. And all we're going to do now, while it's wet, we're going to blend the two areas together. So I'm just going to coat the area first and just do the exact same technique just to get all those horrible streaks out of my painting. But now as I move up into the darker blue, I'm going to create X shapes with my brush. I'm going to get plenty of paint, and I'm going to create these sort of back and forth X shapes. So watch, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Just like rocking a baby. So back and forth, back and forth. And what that's going to do, while it's wet, it's going to blend these two areas together, and we'll have a gradual transition between one colour and the other, and it will look like it's fading off into the distance and look very, very natural. So the horizon's always a lighter shade than the top of the sky. So if you're painting any sky, it doesn't matter what colour, you want to make the horizon lighter in colour at the bottom. So we're going to make the very bottom even lighter. So our sky, it's all nice and blended now. So look at that, it's starting to look really natural. But it's still a little bit too dark at the bottom. So we're going to add some white to our pastel cerulean blue mix. And just at the bottom, we're going to do the exact same trick. So look, we're just going to create our X shapes. Excuse the focus. I think my camera's focusing on my hand. But all you want to do is just at the very, very bottom, we want to do the exact same trick we just did. And we're just going to create our X shapes. And we're just going to blend that white and make it look really nice and pastel at the horizon. And what that should do is create a perfect background sky. So look at that, really, really easy. And you can use this for any picture. And we're just going to add some white to our darker mix. That was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, a tiny bit of black. And we're just going to add some brown and some purple to it. So we're making a nice pastel grey colour, and by adding brown it makes it a bit more silver, and by adding a bit more purple it makes it a bit more cooler, and a tiny dot of black just to make it greyer. So we've got this nice sort of bluey grey, very pastel still because it's got plenty of white in it. And all we're going to do is we're going to block in this big cloud. Now the reason we don't use white straight away, excuse the light, I think I've just walked in front of the light, is the reason we don't use white straight away is we're going to create some shadow colours. So then when we put the highlights over the top, we've got one area in the shade and one area in the light. So excuse me if it seems incredibly bright on the right. I have to use lights at the moment because it is so dark and dull when I'm filming here in London, being the winter. But it is a little bit darker and cooler in blue in the clouds. It's just, I think the light is just making it look a bit more bleached. So we've got this nice medium sort of grey blue now. And all we're going to do, we're just going to add a little bit of brown and a little bit of my cool iris purple and a dot of black just to make the grey just seem a bit darker. So there we go, we're just going to mix it a little bit darker. And just on the right hand side, we're just going to make it a little bit smokier and darker. So this area, if you imagine the sun is on the left, so everything on the right hand side would be getting less sun and would be a bit more in the shade. So now we've got the dark shady colour on the right, we've got this medium colour on the middle. So what we're going to do, we're just going to mix some white and cerulean blue together. A tiny bit of cobalt blue, but mainly cerulean blue and lots and lots of white to create the same colour as we had at the horizon. And then here on the left hand side, this area would be getting bleached by the sun. So all we're just going to do, we're just going to gently blend that into this left hand side and just gently blend it into the previous colours. And what we should have is it one area looks like it's getting all the light and one area looks like it's in the shade. So under the sun it's going to be incredibly bright because the sun is incredibly bright. So these ones, we're just going to use this lighter pastel colour to create highlights. So knowing where the sun is really helps to create light and shadow. So look, all around this area will be right underneath that sun. So it's going to be incredibly bright. So there we go. We just create these nice bright fluffy clouds. So all I'm doing, I'm dunking my medium-sized brush into thick paint and I'm just scraping back and forth across the canvas with it. I'm trying to make all my clouds a little bit bobbly. I don't want them too straight because all clouds are nice and fluffy. So now we've got this transition. We can get some of the same colour and we can just have some low clouds. They're quite flat here at the horizon. So clouds tend to be at the horizon very flat. So they just go across the skyline sort of horizontally. And then as they go up in the sky, they tend to go a bit more diagonal. And that sort of gives the curve effect. It looks like they're fading out. Now unfortunately, I put my finger in all my paint, look, and I've got a multicolour grey here, so I have to be careful because I've dipped my turquoise and my green and everything. So let me sort myself out here. But I'm just going to use some of that darker grey just to sort of block in the corners. There's little bits of my burnt sienna shining through. So let's just neaten up this cloud here. Just so it's nice and blocked in. There we go. So I'm just using the darker shade of grey, the cool one with a bit of purple and brown in the mix. And I'm just going to create some little breakaway parts. So now we've got the colours, you can make this area a little bit darker. So this area is more grey, it's got some blue and purple and brown in it. And just by creating little breakaway ones, like little little splats and shapes. These clouds look like they're a bit more in the shade. And then let's just cover this one. I think unfortunately where my fingers went in all the paint, I've picked up some of this colour and it's looking a bit orangey or something. So excuse me a minute, I'm just going to mix up some more paint. So let's get some blue, some cool purple, some brown to make it grayer, and a little bit of white to make it more pastel, and a little bit more brown, some whites. There we go. Now if you can't find iris purple, I know it's a hard one to get, you can make it with some cobalt blue and some purple. So get some cobalt blue, which is nice cool sort of royally blue, add a little bit of purple to that mix and a tiny dot of white and you should get the cool iris purple. So there we go, that looks a bit neater now. Get rid of all that sort of weird colour that I put my finger in. So we're going to do the same trick. Look, we're just creating little breakaway ones. And then now we're going to get pure titanium white. No other colour, just pure titanium white. And we're going to start adding highlights. So what acrylic paints do is they pick up the colour what's underneath. So even though this looks incredibly bright at the moment, when it dries it will absorb some of the lighter blue that we've just laid down underneath. So let's put a little circle in for our sun just so we know where the light is. So just a little round circle. So around the sun it's almost going to be bleached. So all we're going to do is we're going to create an outline using titanium white. And we're going to make it look really bobbly and fluffy so it looks nice and realistic. And we're going to do our same little breakaway parts. So we could have some look that are just breaking apart. Just making these edges look, get all that sunlight. So the real powerful light from the sun is just bleaching these clouds. Take your time, don't rush. So I'm just trying to work out where I'm going to put the highlights with this titanium white. As you can see, I've got quite a thick blob of paint on the end of my brush. So I'm using quite a lot of thick paint, there's no water in it. And if you find, look, they look ultra bright, the highlights right now, but if you find that your white absorbs some of the colour underneath and dries a bit flat, just dry your work and just reapply thick titanium white over the top and they'll soon look much more brighter. So this corner is going to be getting lots of sunlight, so we're just going to make this extremely bright here. And again with the blending, take your time. If you find I'm going too quick, pause the video and just go at a much slower rate. So I'm just using my finger just to blend it slightly. So let's just have some highlights here under the sun. And then let's get some more paint. Let's have a few just here on the corners, just picking up some of that sunlight. Could have some more little breakaway ones, but now these ones are brighter. So can you see to the right, all the breakaway ones are that sort of grey blue, but these white ones, they sparkle a lot more simply for having this highlight over the top. The same on these ones here, just underneath the sun. So now we've got this perfectly blended sky and we've got these lovely highlights on our clouds. It's starting to look really realistic. So it's really easy, but it's looking really realistic. And we're going to get a dry, clean brush and we're going to dry our painting. Now, please have some baby wipes or a nice cloth or some kitchen roll, and please dry your work before attempting this. I've got a dry, soft brush and I'm going to get some titanium white. and I'm going to wipe away 90% of the paint. So I always just use my scruffy painting clothes, but you can use some kitchen roll. And all we're going to do, because we've got barely any paint on our brush, it's almost like a chalk. It's almost like a really fine sort of powder. Because the brush is dry and it's very, very soft to touch, all I'm doing, I'm just going around my sun in a circle to create a glow effect. And then I'm going to come out, so I'm going to get some white. I'm going to wipe away 90% of the paint, so I've got hardly any paint. Because if I put lots of paint, look, I get a really sharp line. I don't want that. I want to have hardly any paint. And what you get is this chalky effect. And if I come straight down, so diagonally down, I can create sunbeams that look nice and soft and realistic. So taking away half the paint makes the technique. So if you have some kitchen roll, you can just wipe your brush against it, let the bristles go against the canvas, and because the canvas is quite rough, look, it just leaves like a chalky residue. So it's subtle enough to look realistic. So all we're going to do, we're just going to come out. So I don't want too much paint. I just want to make these really subtle. And you can come out a little bit, and as I say, you can go around your circle and the actual sun to make it look like it's glowing. So I'm just going to have one coming up here. And the great thing is if you make a mistake or you're a bit nervous, if your painting is dry, you can just wipe away these sunbeams with a baby wipe or a wet cloth. And you won't have to repaint your sky, it will still be there. So it's always good to dry your work before you attempt to do something that you're a bit nervous or is a bit technical. Because then you don't have to go all the way back, you can just go back to the last point. Almost like replaying a YouTube video, you can literally just go back 30 seconds. So let's have one coming out here. And then one coming out sideways. So I just use my finger just to smear them and just make them a little bit softer. Because as I say, I don't want them really harsh. I want them to look like they're glowing. And as I say, look, I'm just going round the sun. I'm trying to make that chalky residue come off and make it look like it's glowing in the sky. And then I'm just going to make them a little bit longer. Now I know where I want them. I'm just going to make them cut really, really elongated, really, really thin, spindly. So let's just have them coming out. That looks so cool. So let's have a few at the top here. Just really subtle, not as harsh. That looks so cool. We're zoomed in. So it looks a little bit messy, but when you zoom out, it will look really realistic. So let's just get a big blob and just fill in the sun now. So I'm just going to get quite thick paint now. And I'm just going to create my circle, make it more circular. Less scruffy. There we go. I'm just going to make that glow look a bit prettier. So a lot of the realism is just taking your time. So don't rush. As I say, if you find I'm going too quick, slow it down, pause the video. You think like we are painting a really realistic painting in just under an hour and a half. So that is quick. So take your time. So as I say, look, I'm just going over this edge, making it a little bit more fluffy, a bit more bobbly. sort of like cotton wool. But one of the reasons I'm going over it again, as I say, it's repetitive, but it works. It's just to make that white really, really pop, because it's dried and it looks a bit flat. And if you paint in a cloud and you don't like it, I'll show you in a minute. You can just mix a bit of sky colour and change anything. So the great thing about acrylics, they are they're really, really cheap. So they're a lot cheaper than oil paints. So if you're learning, they're very, very cheap and affordable to learn. You don't need to spend a lot to be quite good and get good equipment. And the other thing is they're really forgiving. So if you make a mistake, you can just dry your work and paint over it. So unlike oils where you have to wait a few days for them to dry, with acrylics you can literally just dry it and paint over it. So I'm just going over these highlights. Just taking my time, chilling. So let's have a little cloud sparkling in the sunbeam, why not? So look, if you don't like something, you can just mix up some of the sky colour and just change a shape. So if you don't like the shape of your clouds, once it's dry, just paint over it. So this one I think was a bit too chunky, so I'm just going over it with some of the sky colour. You can even add little holes in your clouds. So if you want to get really realistic and you want to put some little sky holes, I'm not going to do that, I'm just going to show you just as an example. You can always just poke holes in, and then once it's dry, look, you can just go over the top with the same technique to put your sunbeam in, and no one will notice. So if you change anything, just don't forget to re-put things back. So there we go. Let's make this one a little bit longer, just so it's touching that cloud. Make that glow a little bit brighter. It's almost like lens flare, you know, if you take a photo. But look at that, look how realistic that looks now. So we've got this lovely transition in our sky, we've got these highlights, we've got our cools and our bright areas in our clouds. We've got this transition here from this cool grey to the lovely whites. And now we've got this sparkling sun. It really draws attention. And because we've got the dark blue background, it really, really pops. And it looks like it's fading off at the horizon. So now we're going to put some trees. So we're going to build up some trees. So we're going to use this green, which is called chromium oxide green, which is a bit of a mouthful. But it's basically a light green. It's like a light leaf sort of colour. And we're going to get cobalt blue. I seem to have run out. So let's just get some cobalt blue. Now, cobalt blue is excellent for, it matches the sky. So it's reflecting the colour of the sky, but it's also really good for pushing things off into the distance. So if you're painting things like trees or mountains that are far away into the distance, by adding some cobalt blue, it makes it look like it's fading off into the distance. So by adding the green and the blue together, we're just going to push against the canvas and create spiky sort of shapes of trees. So these could be all these bushes and trees on the riverbank. So try to make them all different heights. Don't have them all the same. So look, let's make them all bobbly. Some big, some small. And all I'm doing, look, I'm just pushing against the canvas. Just splatting them. Now, as I move towards the swans itself in the middle, I'm just easing up a little bit, just like we did with the sunbeams, and just making them a little more lighter and softer. So look, I'm just going around these edges just to make them look a bit more prickly, a bit more leaf-like. So let's miss the middle out for now, and let's just do the other side. So let's have all different sizes. Now this is the same colour, as I say, my light is to the right, so it looks a little bit lighter, but it is the same. Because what we want to do is we want to have darken edges to draw you towards the middle. And where we've got the sun beaming down on these trees, we'll make an area in the middle a bit lighter. So just around the swans, I'm not going to push as hard. So I'm going to make these trees, these bushes, a little bit softer by just not pushing as hard. I'm just going to have barely any paint. I'm just going to scrape against the canvas very, very lightly, almost like I'm shading an area. I'm just going to have the impression of them. Whereas the ones at either side, I'm going to push really hard against the canvas and make them look really prominent. Now we're going to get some cad yellow and white. So cad yellow and white. And we're just going to add it to our green and cobalt blue. But we want it to be really pastel, so we've added yellow and white. And all we're going to do, we're going to wipe away most of the paint again, just like we did with the sunbeam. And we're just going to colour them in. So I'm just gently shading them. And these are all the trees that are getting some sunlight. And again, are getting bleached, just like the clouds. So same technique. All these trees are getting all that sunlight. And it's just bleaching them. Making them look like they're all highlighted in the sun. And again, just around this area where the sunbeam's touching them. We just want to make them nice and soft. So it looks like it's fading off. There we go. And then the opposite, if we've got all this sunlight here, these areas, they're going to have a big contrast and they're going to be almost really dark and gloomy because they're getting all the shade. So we're just going to get some brown and some of our chromium oxide green. So some brown, and we're going to add some cobalt blue to make it nice and dark. And this time we're going to add a little bit of black just to make it a little bit darker. So plenty of cobalt blue, chromium oxide green, a little bit of black, and some brown. So we'll test it out, we'll see if it's dark enough. I think it's still a bit too light, so I'm just going to add a little bit more blue and black. There we go. Still going to make it green, can't leave out the green. There we go, that's a lot darker. So just these areas, these are just going to be a bit more in the shade. And all I'm doing, look, I'm leaving little gaps just to make it look texturized. Not too detailed, because obviously this is really far away. But I'm just leaving little gaps so the undercolour can shine through and it just looks like it's bushes and shrubs. So again, just like our corners being dark, by making our bushes either side, it draws your eyes towards the middle, just above the swans, which is what we want you to focus at. We want you to focus down the middle towards the swans. So there we go. And don't worry, look, I've got chalk as a guide for my horizon. Don't worry if your bushes and things are wonky. We'll neaten it up with some painting tape in a minute. So this area is dry. I'm just going to get some more of the yellow and white. And a tiny bit of green. So yellow, plenty of white to make it pastel, and a little bit of that green and blue. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to go over it again. Just buff it up a bit, make it look a little bit more brighter. There we go. So we just want it to look like it's getting really bleached in the sunlight. above this swan's head. There we go. So that's looking really cool, and it's looking really pushed back. And then, as I say, don't worry if it's wonky. We'll neaten all that up with some painting tape in a minute, and we'll measure a nice straight horizon. What we want to do is just work on the light and the transitions. So now we're going to work on the water. So under the sun, it's going to be a lot brighter, and it's going to be almost like the horizon. So think of a mirror. So our horizon colour was cerulean blue and cobalt blue with loads of white, wasn't it? So we're going to mix that colour up. We're going to make a nice pastel light blue. So plenty of white, cerulean blue and a little bit of cobalt blue. And we're going to match the same colour that we've got at the horizon. We're going to add a tiny bit of brown, just a tiny bit to make it a little bit more water-like and a bit more grayer. So let's get loads on our big brush. And as I say, don't worry yet about straightening it up. If you want to, you can use the painting tape now, but I will use some in a minute. We just want to block her in first. So the great thing about using, again, a darker colour for your outline, if you're using pastel colours such as this light blue, you can still see that outline of the swan even if you paint over it. So don't be scared. You should be able to see your outline still. So I'm just going to leave that little heart shape in the middle. So if you just think of a mirror. The sky would be really, really bright where the water meets the horizon. So we just want to recreate that where it's getting all the sunlight. So we're going to come down about the same distance either side. So right where that swan's bum is. So just where his tail is. Let's do the same this side, just so it sort of matches. Okay, so this area, as I say, is getting all the sunlight. So as we move downwards in the painting, the water is going to get darker because it's going to get more in the shade. And it's going to look a bit darker. So we're going to use another colour. We're going to get cerulean blue, cobalt blue, add our little bit of brown just to make it a little bit grayer. Have less white, so some white but not as much, so it's darker in colour. And then we're going to add a tiny bit of green just to give it a bit of that river water tinge. A little bit more brown. And a tiny bit of black just to make it a little bit grayer. So there we go, we've got this darker colour. So we're just going to get darker. Don't worry again about blending just yet. We just want to block her in. We'll probably have lots of streaks again, so we'll probably have to go over the top and we'll blend it then. We just want to get the colours right first. So if we're moving away from the light source, the colour is getting darker. And as I say, with all the tutorials, once you learn these core principles, you can apply this to anything. So say we were painting a red sunset, the top of the painting would be dark red, and at the horizon it'd be much more pastel and pink. If you were doing a yellow one, it'd be much more gold at the top and more pastel and yellow, like Naples yellow at the horizon. So it's the same trick every time. You just use darker shades of the same colours. So we're going to get blue, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, brown and green. So the same mix. So there's some more brown and a bit more black to make it darker. And this time we've got no white. It's the same colours, but we've just not got any white in it now. And we're going to paint the corners nice and dark. So again, same principle. By having the corners nice and dark, we can get you to focus down the middle. So let's just block her in. Don't worry about the shape of the reflections. We'll paint that in a minute. If you've noticed, my swan's reflections, the necks are quite wonky. That's deliberate, because when you see a reflection on water, it's not straight, because obviously there's ripples in the water. So by making it deliberately wonky, we can create the realism, you see. So I'll teach you that in a minute. So we've got our darkened corners again, and we're going to dry our work, and we're just going to go over it a second time, just like we did with the what's it called, with the sky. And we're just going to get out any streaks. So there's a big streak here, and we're going to work on our blending now. So as I say, don't worry if your horizon is not straight. We'll fix that in a minute. So the first colour's on, and then we're going to move to the second colour, and we're going to start blending. So let's get a big dollop of the second colour, and we're going to gently just create our X shapes, and we're just going to blend the two colours together, and the transitions should look fantastic, and it will look like it's fading into one another, and it won't even be noticeable. And then we're going to get that colour. And if you've got any streaks or any bits of the burnt sienna shining through, just go over the top. Just make it look a lot more polished. Now don't forget, at home, if you're painting along with the tutorials, don't forget to tag me at @mstewartpaintings with your version of the tutorials, so I can see them and I can shout them out for you on my little Hall of Fame section on Instagram. If you use Facebook, we have a Facebook at @mstewartpaintings as well, and of course here on YouTube, so don't forget to tag me. And thank you to everyone who's liking and subscribing and supporting the channel and sharing all these tutorials. The more you share them, the more other artists can find us, and the more people who find us, obviously the more people we can help. YouTube is fantastic to learn for free. So I'm just darkening it up here. So I'm just making a darker shade of the same colour by just adding a bit more blues and a bit of black and brown. But yeah, YouTube is fantastic. You can learn anything for free. So it's great. And as I say, the more people you share and like, the algorithm will push the videos, and the more people will get to learn how to paint for free, which is really, really cool. It's all about giving back, trying to help one another. So look, I'm just darkening the corners with that darker shade. We're just blending it into the previous colour. And again, like always, we want to make our left corner nice and dark. The right corner is dark, it's just obviously the light is bleaching it, because that's where we're going to sign it. So we've got this nice darkened corners, and then we're going to swap to a flat-headed brush, and we're going to use that same colour to paint ripples. So now we've got this lovely blended river as an underpainting. Now we can use this sharp edge of this flat brush to create ripples. So all I'm doing, I'm just pushing against the canvas, and I'm just letting little bits of paint come off. And I'm just trying to create different shapes and sizes. So some are going to have little ones, and some are going to go quite a long way across. But a good way to create a ripple is create a little scoop. So look, I'm just going to create like a little scoop shape, and just go back and forth. So like scoop upwards, just slightly, don't go too diagonally. Let's scoop with the brush, almost like you're rocking it. And then as you move up into the water, so we have these scoops just here around the two swans, because they're moving and they're creating quite a lot of like friction in the water. And then as we move up, we're just going to get a little bit flatter. So look, we have these little scoops to create these little ripples. So I'm just using that sharp edge of the brush. And then as we move up, we're just going to create little flat ones. So all we're doing is creating lines. Look, lines going across. And we're going to stop just in line with the swans, because as we move up, we're going to use a lighter shade to make it look like the ripples are fading off into the distance. So we're using this dark shade in and around the swans. But can you see now we're putting the ripples on, can you see the blended colours underneath is tricking your eyes? So now these ripples are going over the top. It's starting to look really realistic. So as I say, as we move towards the riverbank, we're going to use a lighter shade. So we're just going to mix these two areas together to have a slight middle colour. So it's just slightly darker than the middle colour. So it will show up. But it's still very pastel, because that middle colour has plenty of pastel white in it, didn't it? And all we're going to do, look, we're just going to go across horizontally with our brush, and we're just going to create little lines going across the river. And we're trying to make them as thin as we can and as flat as we can. So it looks like these little ripples are just fading off into the distance. So I'm hardly putting any pressure on my canvas, just whipping it back and forth, look, side to side. And that lighter pastel colour, because it's not as harsh, it looks like these ripples are just fading off into the distance. And again, tricks your eyes like magic. And if they're too harsh, look, you can just use your finger and just smear them, just to push them back even more. And then at the bottom, because the bottom's getting lots of shade because it's furthest from the sun, we're going to get some cobalt blue and brown, and a little bit of black. So cobalt blue, brown, a little bit of black, and a tiny bit of green, not too much. We still want it very blue. So a little bit of green. And we're going to make a really dark shadow colour. And we're just going to create some harsher ripples and some reflections. So if you imagine these swans, they are beaming in the sunlight. So underneath them, they're going to have quite a harsh silhouette. And that's going to be rippled onto the lake water. So we don't want to just use pure black, because that would look like a silhouette and it would look cartoony. So by having lots of cobalt blue in the mix, we can create a really harsh shadow, but still make it look realistic. And again, like always, by having darker colours in the foreground, it brings it towards the viewer. So all I'm doing, I'm just going to block in roughly the shape of the swan's neck and underneath them. And what I'll do is I'll swap over to a fine liner to do the fine detail. I'm just using my flathead brush just to block her in first. So as I say, I want the necks to deliberately be wonky, so it looks like it's rippling in the water. And then while I've got this lovely brush, I'm just going to put some harsher ripples in and around the swans. Just so these are the areas that aren't getting much sunlight, and it's creating a harsh ripple. So behind it, as it gets some wash as they move. And we can create our scoops again, look, so we can create our little divots. So these can be some harsh ones. And especially as we come down, because we're getting darker and cooler. So we want to create some harsher ones down here at the bottom to bring them nearer towards us. But it's the same principle. So we want this corner nice and dark. So let's just do some over here in the middle, just so it all matches. And then let's have some on the right hand side. Again, we don't want to go too far up into the water because dark colours bring them towards us, so we want that background pushed back. So that's why we've got the pastel flatter ripples in the background. But these ones in the foreground, we want them to look really harsh and near us. So look at that, look how realistic that is looking. Wow! So painting water is super easy once you know how, but it's really the underpainting that tricks your eyes. And when you put the highlights and shadows over the top, like now, we can make it look super realistic. So I've measured with chalk a nice straight horizon, and I've dried my work before I put some painting tape on top of it because I don't want to lift all the hard work we've just done. And I'm just going to mix up some of the tree colours that we made, and I'm going to go right down to the tape, and I'm going to create a nice straight horizon. So the tree colour was the chromium oxide green and cobalt blue, and a tiny bit of black on the edges, wasn't it? It's because we want those edges to be nice and dark. And the great thing about using chalk and painting tape is it doesn't leave any marks. So if you're ever measuring things on your painting, you can use chalk and then you can just paint over it like I'm doing now. And it doesn't leave any marks, unlike a pencil. So it's a good thing. It's really cheap as well. Buy like a little pack of 10 chalks in any shop. So again, we want to leave the middle to be really, really nice and bleached in the sun. So I've got that yellow, white, and a little bit of the green and blue. So let's just make all this nice and straight under the swan's chin. And then we're just going to work on our transitions. So I'm just going to work on the blending. Here on the left, it's a big jump between the darks and the lights. So I'm just going to blend the two areas together, just so you don't notice it as much. So it looks nice and natural. There we go. And the same here on the right. So it's all nice and symmetrical. And then if we remove our tape, we should have a perfectly straight horizon. As I say, if you've got any chalk or anything, you can just wipe it away and it'll go. So we've got all this sunlight beaming down, and we want to get a clean brush, and we just want to get some titanium white and come straight below it. Now you can, if you're a bit nervous, you can keep your painting tape on and do this beforehand, but I'm quite good with a brush, so I'm just going to do it freehand. But if you're worried about, again, having a nice straight horizon, just keep your tape on. But all we're doing, we're just trying to create a shimmer on the lake with the sunlight beaming down. So like we do with the ocean tutorials, same principle. We're just having some of that sunlight bleach the water. And again, just using a flat-headed brush makes it so much easier to create these ripples. And now we've got these dark shadows, we can literally go into them a little bit with some of these ripples. So we can like do our scoops, these bigger scoops. And this looks like all the ripples are getting a bit of that sunlight. So it creates like a shimmer on the water. So let's have a few behind him. So the same techniques over and over again. It's just combining the harshness of the shadows with the bright highlights. I don't want to go really bright as I go down. I want to keep the really, really white here at the top, because this area is getting all the sunlight. So let's just move it a little bit more to the right. I think it's a little bit wonky. So we're just going to use the same technique, same brush, and we're just going to go a bit more to the right just so it looks more symmetrical. just under this swan's chin, and then in between the sort of heart shape they make between the two of them. And what you can do, you can go into the ripples. So look, by going into the shadows, it creates the look of the water shimmering. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to mix some of the darker colour up, and I'm just going to go over the top of some areas. So just like the highlights, if you want to make things look harsher and darker, you can just give it 2 coats. So I'm just going to make just under the swans a little bit darker, using the same colour, but just by giving it a second coat of paint, it just makes it look a bit meaner, a bit darker. So as I say, if you deliberately make your reflections a little bit wonky, it looks like the water is moving. So especially the swans' necks, we don't want them identical, and their bodies, we want it to look like it's sort of rippling in the water. So I'm just going to create some darker sort of waves, or ripples here in the foreground, because they're nearest to us. And you can always, as I say, darken the corners. You can turn your brush upright and just come in from the corners and just brush that dark colour just to shade them. There we go. Just so it's got a nice dark shade. And if we swap over to a fine liner, we can make their necks, as I say, deliberately sort of like elongated, so it looks like they're rippling in the water. And we can create little pockets of shadow. So as the light sort of shimmers down, you also get these sort of darker shades with the silhouette. So as I say, I've got a rough shape of the head, so you know it is a swan, but it is deliberately all elongated. I'm so bad at describing what I'm trying to show. I hope visually it all makes sense. I'm an artist. I'm not good with the words. As Alan Watts would say, maybe next time around, but not this time. Doing these videos is probably the most I've spoken today. I'm a very quiet person, so less is more. So speaking for an hour and 20 odd minutes is hard work for me. So there we go. Look, we're just creating these little divots. And it's so much easier, again, look, having the right brush, so having a smaller brush just makes it much easier to put this sort of fine detail on. So let's do the other one. So all I'm doing, if you think of the shape of its neck, I'm just coming out either side of it. And then let's just create its head and its beak. Let's make it deliberately sort of wonky and weird. There we go. Have some shadow just sort of coming down. As I say, sorry about the light, it's very bleached, but when we zoom out, it'll look very dark. So let's just have some ripples here, just to carry on that shadow. Where its tail's reflecting in the water. And then now this is dry, look, we've just got a clean brush and we're just going over it with that white. Just making that area really sparkle. So now we've got that dark silhouette in the water. Now look, if we cut into it with our sharp white, so all it is titanium white, we can create little ripples in the shadows. So look, going into the shadows slightly, just creating these little sharp ripples into it. See how I'm going into the darks? So let's do it on the neck and around it. It's looking like it's shimmering around the reflection, you see. Smooth that up. So I don't want to go really light in the left corner because I want it to be nice and dark, and also I want to sign it. So let's put some through the necks. So when I move my hand, look. So I'm just going through the dark shadows, looking like that light is sparkling as it goes up and down as the water's moving. So let's have some in between them. So there we go. Load up my brush. Let's do some over here. So we're going, look, we're cutting through the reflection with that sharp edge of the brush, and just these little sharp lines make it again look like it's wobbling in the water. So let's just put some around her. And let's just get some cerulean blue and some purple and some white. So we're going to create a cool blue. So cerulean blue, purple, white, and a tiny bit of brown just to suck a bit of the colour out. And we're going to start blocking in our swans. So the reason we're using blue is because this side of the swan is hardly getting any sunlight. So it's more in the shade and it's more cool. So we can make it, trick the eyes and make it look like this area of the swan is more in the shade. So we're just going to colour her in with this nice cool pastel blue. So by adding a little bit of purple, you can make it look cooler. So this area is going to be nice and in the shade. So let's get loads of paint and let's do the other one. And then when we've got this nice contrast with the cool blues, when we add our highlights, that will make our swan, all its white bits sparkle, you see. So we need these cool colours so the highlights stand out. So we're going to lay them first. So we're just going to add some more purple to the mix and a little bit of brown to create a nice grey again, just like we did with the clouds. And then these, let's add a little bit more brown. These areas, dot of black, literally a dot. These areas like its neck and stuff, they're getting hardly any sunlight. So we're just going to create a nice dark shadow. And then just as it sort of ruffles in its feathers, and underneath we'll create that. So let's just do its neck first. I love how that when they come together they sort of create a heart shape. It's so cool. So we're going to do underneath them. So underneath its wings, and it's as they tuck them in. So we're just going to make that a little bit darker. So we've got this sort of pastel blue on the top, and this dark purpley colour at the bottom. And then we just put a little bit here as its wings are tucked in. So we've got the shadow colour on first, and then we're going to start adding the highlights over the top. So let's just make his bum just a little bit nicer and neater. So we're going to get some cad yellow and lots of white. So cad yellow and lots of white to make it really Naples yellow. So cad yellow, lots and lots of white. Going to add teeny tiny bit of cad orange, just a tiny bit, but loads and loads of white, please. And we're just going to lay an underpainting colour first. So we're just going to lay this nice sort of pastel yellow on all the bits that we think are going to get the sunlight. So this is sort of like, this bit is sort of like back, and their necks, and the tip of their tails and wings. So these areas will all be getting bleached in the sun, just like the clouds. So we're going to create a nice sharp outline. So let's do this one's tail. And then outline its wings. There we go. I love swans, they're so elegant, they're so pretty. So let's do the top of his head, it's getting all the sunlight. The same one for you. And its neck. There we go. And the same for you. Let's do your neck. Create that heart shape. There we go. And then this bit on his back. So we're going to get some pure titanium white now. And we're going to put in the really harsh highlights. And by going over that yellow, it's going to absorb some of the yellow, which we want. So we're just going to get this pure titanium white. So now, just like we did with the clouds, we're trying to emphasize all these areas that are getting absolutely bleached with the sunlight. So things like his neck, let's just do their backs first, and then we'll do the necks and their heads at the same time. So all this area will be getting loads of sunlight. And his wings, top of his tail, his feathers. And then let's add some little nice sharp ripples here, just so it looks like it's popping in the sunlight. Some just here in the middle. Some little sparkles just here. And then let's just do his neck. And then just make it really, really bright. And same this outer bit of his neck and his head. That's right where the sun is. So just starting to create some of the feathers. So I'm just creating little divots in the wing. I don't want them too harsh. Just some little, just really just subtle little areas of feathers, just so it looks like it's sparkling. Just little gaps so some of that yellow can shine through. As I say, we're not going to go super detailed, but we want to use the colours to create the detail. So the top of his head is getting really bleached. So we're just going to create the roundness of his bonds, top of his head. And then just a little bit on his beak. So look at that, that's looking cool. The same for you. Let's make your head nice and round. And the sharpness of that light on your beak. And coming round on your neck. And then have your inside of your neck getting the sunlight. There we go. And then let's put some of your little feathers in. So we're just gradually building them both up. Taking our time. And using colours to create the realism, you see. So if I zoom out for you a little bit, and we're going to make this colour, which is a pastel blue. So we're going to get loads of white, some cerulean blue, and a tiny bit of purple. So lots and lots of white, some cerulean blue, and a tiny bit of purple. And we're going to make this really nice sort of pastel blue, and this is going to be the colour that links the sort of really bright whites to the really dark shadows. This is going to be sort of the colour that sort of bridges the two areas. So certain areas they're going to be getting a highlight, but this cooler blue is just not as harsh. So we're just going to shade in areas around his eye here. We can just start putting some little detail on, little feathers. So what I'm doing, I'm just creating little creases, little divots on his neck. Just either side of that white, just to sort of link the two areas together. Same with you. Just around his eye, top of his head, on his neck again. So if we zoom back in so you can see it clearer. So all we're doing, look, we're just trying to create some little feathers. So these are all the bits of the swan's body that's sort of sparkling in the light. Just linking the two areas together. So let's do a bit of his wing. Have some feathers coming up here. Let's say you can just smear it with your finger to take the harshness out. do the same for you. Let's make your wing and your tail look nice and pretty. Have some feathers. And just here. He's going to be a little bit brighter because he's a bit more in the sun. Let's give you a little bit more feathers. So now if we go back over with our titanium white, we can really get the highlights going now. So same as the clouds, we want to give it 2 coats of paint and we want to use thick paint. So I'm not using any water. I've got a wet brush, but I don't want to use hardly any water because I want really thick paint to make these highlights really bright. Things like his neck and his body. So there we go, looking really harsh now. And it should, now with that cool blue, look quite seamless. So as I say, when we're zoomed in this close, you can see there's not much detail, it's the colours. But when we zoom out, that's what creates the realism. So as I keep saying, all the tutorials, as you get better at drawing and using these techniques on your own art, you can just apply it and you just keep plugging away and learning highlights and shadows and colour combinations and how light works. And as you get better at drawing, combining that with those skills, you'll be fantastic. So let's just make this bit a little bit brighter. Just moving it into that cool blue. Just here on the tip of his tail, really bright. Her tail. There we go. Let's just have some sparkles in the water here. And then I'm just going to get some black. So swans have really dark eyes, and then they have like this sort of bit that comes down around their beak, and then underneath their beak is very dark black. So all I'm going to do is put in their eyes and then go straight down its beak and then underneath it. So underneath the beak. Have a little bit on their nose, don't they? They have like a little sort of nostril bit. And underneath there's that jet black to make them look so regal, and posh and lovely. So I'm just going to make his chin look a little bit darker. Here we go. And then let's just get some black and some cobalt blue just to make a nice harsh shadow colour. So black and cobalt blue, still plenty more blue than black. And then we're just going to create some shadows. So we've got this nice blended area, and we're just going to create some a little bit harsher shadows on some area of the birds. So just areas where the water is sort of coming up on their feathers and things, just to make them look more realistic. Now we've got those beautiful sparkles on there and the highlights. We can just put some of these shadows in to complement it. So just here, just think of areas that aren't getting as much sun. So where their wings meet. tucked in. It's just getting some shade. Just here on his neck. And then let's do you. So here on your neck. On your head. Gonna make him a little slightly darker, the one on the right. Just so he's a bit yin and yang, so one's more in the sunlight than the other one. So let's just have a little bit of definition in his wings. This is looking so pretty. I was going to do one for Valentine's Day because that's why I ideally chose the swan, because they do create the heart shape in the middle. So I'm sorry it's not very romantic, but I think if you painted this for someone and gave it to someone, that would make a really cool Valentine's Day gift. So it's kind of romantic, it's kind of nice. So I'm just using that that blue and black again, just to put some more ripples in the water. Just bringing it forward. So I hope you can see, everyone at home, that the painting all comes together at the last minute. So if you think at the beginning when we started this, it seems so out of reach and so far away, but by just doing each step to the best of your ability, it soon all comes together. But you've got to have faith in yourself and you've got to believe you can do it. And as I say, like, take your time. If you find the videos going a bit quick, pause it or re-watch it and practice, because practice makes perfect. And I hope these tutorials are relaxing for people. I find watching other artists here on YouTube and just being a sponge and absorbing all this is really relaxing for me. So I hope you find them relaxing and chill you out. So we've got our nice ripples. And then all I'm going to do, I'm just going to put some bit more bright titanium white just under here, just to have some sparkles in the clouds. Just the very finishing touches. Let's have a little bit more sparkle on this one. And have a little floater one here. And let's just do the tops of their heads, just so they're glistening. So there we go. And better do the other one just so it matches. And I think the swans are pretty much done and we're finished. So I've signed her in the bottom left hand corner. So you've learned how to paint a sky and how to push it back with a nice horizon and darker colours at the top. We've learned how to paint realistic clouds in acrylic paints, how to use shadows and highlights on them, how to create sunbeams, how to even put shimmer on your water and even in the background trees, how to paint reflections, and then how to paint ripples, and of course how to paint these beautiful lovely pair of swans. So I hope the tutorial wasn't too advanced. I want to still make them for beginners and intermediate painters, but I also want to push people to get them out of their comfort zone and make these tutorials a little bit harder each week. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for all the likes and subscribes and everyone supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. And don't forget to tag me at Paintings with your version of the tutorials. See you next time. Bye now.